October's greetings. I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, here at Camp October, reviewing the original Halloween comic book miniseries published by Chaos Comics from 2000 to 2001.
Why do you keep them under there?
Mom doesn't like me to have them.
Out of the big four slasher icons of Michael, Jason, Freddy, and Leatherface, and hell, let's even include Pinhead and Chucky in the mix, Michael Myers was dead last to get a comic book in any form. Until recent years, despite being the icon that kickstarted the slasher movie trend, it always felt like the shape was relatively low on the rung of popularity of slasher icons for a while. The original Halloween was heralded as an influential classic, but you can barely see Michael Myers in the first film. He's not on the posters until the fourth film. The Halloween sequels seemed to become eclipsed by rival franchises, and it just seemed like Michael Myers didn't quite have the marketing juice that Jason and especially Freddy had at the height of their powers.
Don't fall asleep or you'll wake up dead.
Mainstream audiences tended to be less familiar with Michael Myers compared to his peers. They weren't pumping out Michael Myers merch like Freddy merch, and for the first 20 years of the Halloween franchise's history, the only tie-in media available were novelizations of the first 4 movies. And that shitty Atari game. That started to change with the release of Kelly O'Rourke's Halloween young adult novels, and with the release of Halloween H20 and the shape's exposure to another generation through Scream. New interest in Michael Myers began to mount, and that led to him receiving his very first comic series near the start of the new millennium, published by the now defunct Chaos Comics, known for publishing comics like Evil Ernie and its more popular spin-off, Lady Death. The edgy, sexy, violent kinds of comics that were popular for a while, but fizzled out in the 2000s. Chaos Comics' Halloween series ran for 3 issues and was written by the late horror author Phil Nutman, and drawn by various artists that I'll get into later. And believe me, I'm going to go into one of these artists in particular.
I can understand why.
Despite being officially written by Phil Nutman, Chaos Comics' Halloween series is based on the outline of Daniel Franz's pitch for an 8th Halloween film. Daniel Franz, of course, wrote the 6th film in the series, The Curse of Michael Myers, which, to put things lightly, is a divisive entry in the franchise. But Franz had a good working relationship with the original producer of the film series, the late Mustafa Akkad, so Franz would often be consulted on Halloween projects or asked to pitch ideas when Akkad was looking to produce another Halloween sequel. Chaos released their Halloween comics during the 4-year gap between Halloween H20 and what would ultimately be the 8th movie, Halloween Resurrection. Allowing the writer of Curse of Michael Myers to share his own version of Halloween 8, that's better than the actual Halloween 8 we got in 2002. But that's not really saying much. But still, is it worth reading this take on a Halloween 8? I'll break it down in my review of Chaos Comics' Halloween. But first I have a message from my sponsor, me. Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel, help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday, and archive commentaries if you miss the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Here are the movies I'll be streaming next Sunday. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested in my bonus movie night streams, and I thank you in advance.
Lori, what's the boogeyman?
Each issue of Chaos Comics' Halloween series works on its own as a standalone Halloween story, but they form a larger narrative. Issue 1 is honestly the best of the 3 issues, telling a story in between Michael's killing of his sister Judith and his escape from Smith's Grove in the original Halloween.
The evil is gone.
Essentially, Tommy Doyle, one of the kids Laurie Strode babysat in the original Halloween, and who becomes obsessed with the shape and curse of Michael Myers,
But this time I'll be ready.
is now researching for a book he's writing on his favorite boogeyman. One of the goals of this comic series was to attempt to connect what was, at that point, 2 separate timelines in the Halloween series. The then latest film, H20, disregarded the events of Halloween's 4, 5, and 6, dubbed by fans as the Thorn Trilogy. Keep in mind, it was never made official that 4, 5, and 6 weren't canon to H20. There are just no direct connections between H20 and the preceding trilogy for the sake of H20 focusing on Laurie after faking her death. But technically, nothing in Halloween H20 contradicts the events of the Thorn Trilogy, making it possible to connect Curse of Michael Myers to H20, which does come with the consequence of implying Laurie Strode left her first child, Jamie Lloyd, to die in Haddonfield, but there are worse things for Laurie Strode to be than a bad mother, as this comic series reveals. Tommy Doyle writing a Michael Myers book is just a framing device for the real story of the first issue of Halloween, where Tommy comes into possession of Dr. Loomis's diary from a doctor at Smith's Grove Sanitarium. Though this doc isn't able to personally give Tommy the diary, as he unwillingly deep-throated the Shape's knife. Savage as fuck! Once Tommy begins reading Loomis's diary, Issue 1's story becomes a flashback to Loomis's early days treating Michael, where Loomis starts out somewhat sympathetic towards Michael, wanting to move the 7-year-old Michael away from the general population of the sanitarium, but Loomis's request is rejected by the chief administrator, Dr. Carpenter. Yeah, nearly every new character introduced in this Halloween comic series is named after either a real person who was involved with the Halloween series, or another horror creator. There's also a Dr. Hill, named after the co-creator of Halloween, Deborah Hill, a character named Wallace, named after Tommy Lee Wallace, art director of the original film, / director of Season of the Witch, and there's even a Dr. Block, named after the author of Psycho. These kinds of Easter eggs are cute, but it can be distracting from the story when they're so obvious. Oh yeah, he's named after that guy. Awesome.
Oh, Miss Tate, happy Halloween.
The story of Issue 1 attempts to address how exactly Dr. Loomis spent 15 years treating a seemingly catatonic patient, and in order to accomplish this, it has to take some liberties with what Dr. Loomis has said in the movies about Michael just staring at a wall, never doing anything.
I watched him for 15 years, sitting in a room, staring at a wall.
The comic instead suggests that no, Michael did in fact do things at Smith's Grove, and he even managed to kill quite a few people, which maybe would have been worth mentioning to Sheriff Brackett instead of just talking about Michael's eyes.
The blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
The comic gets around the messiness of prequel contradictions through a technicality. Anything bad that happens in the story is heavily implied to be Michael's doing. We just don't see Michael do it, so it's technically ambiguous. This is established when Loomis tries to get Michael to draw something, which Michael does only while Loomis is distracted by a phone call. It's consistent with the portrayal of Michael in the movies. We know he does things like eat dogs, and Michael probably runs, and even has to go to the bathroom. But we don't usually see these things within a narrative, because it'd be weird seeing Michael Myers do these things. Essentially, Michael is grouped together with teenage boys at Smith's Grove Sanitarium, and these miniature psychos are a lot more outwardly aggressive than Michael. Like the violent bully Tony, the deranged self-harm addict Roger, Blair, who I guess is Michael Myers if he was black, and Adrian, whose mental illness is he's a fat kid who likes to watch Hogan's Heroes. Truly a monster that needs to be separated from society. Michael basically discreetly attacks or kills his fellow Smith's Grove inmates in retaliation for showing Michael disrespect. Tony tries to beat up Michael, but Tony ends up with a crayon lodged in his eye. Savage as fuck! Adrian eats Michael's birthday cake, which I assume was dog-flavored, so Michael burns Adrian alive in the shower, with Adrian dying later of a broken heart. Roger seemingly killed himself, and a girl named Nancy says Michael has cooties at a Halloween party, so she gets drowned while bobbing for apples. Her head is bobbing with those apples now. Yeah, Michael Myers almost exclusively kills kids in this comic, but he's a kid in this too, so it's fair play. Loomis's suspicions surrounding Michael grow over time, and the events of the comic do feel like a more concrete explanation for why Dr. Loomis is so obsessed with Michael, and convinced that he's the devil in the flesh beyond just Michael staring at a wall or having soulless eyes. No, he was fucking killing people at the institution. But because Michael is so inconspicuous in his behavior and sneaky in his actions, nobody suspects Michael but his own doctor.
Michael Myers is the most dangerous patient I have ever observed.
Loomis is at least somewhat distracted from the gravity of the Michael Myers situation as he romances and becomes engaged to his associate, Dr. Hill, who I assume is turned on by obsessive psychiatrists who vaguely look like Homer Simpson.
Are you little?
Myers makes things personal, though, when Michael pushes Dr. Hill off the roof and makes it look like a suicide. She's doing the Family Guy fall pose. Dr. Loomis ultimately realizes that curing Michael is impossible and vows to instead protect the world from Michael. Loomis doesn't do a great job at it, but he does the best he can.
You don't know what death is.
The first issue is bookended with the Shape attacking Tommy Doyle. Tommy references that he thought he killed Michael, placing the story after Curse of Michael Myers. So Tommy unloads a few rounds, turns Michael into Richard Pryor, and knocks the Shape's ass out a window. Tommy should know by now that defenestration allows Michael to vanish. Like I said, the first issue of Chaos Comics Halloween is the best of the 3 issues. It has a completely standalone story that's mostly told during the 15-year time gap of the original Halloween, and it keeps its story grounded for the most part. We see glimpses of a young Michael Myers' life without ruining the mystique of the character like in the Rob Zombie remake. The Shape is exactly the same character as a kid, he just has a much smaller shape, and the way the prequel deaths are handled don't contradict the films too heavily. The story of the comic is more about Dr. Loomis and how he becomes the man he is in the original film, so it's interesting to explore a character who in some ways is nearly as mysterious as Michael Myers, to see a more human side to Loomis for a change, and in some ways Tommy Doyle reading Loomis's diaries is mirrored by the podcasters in Halloween 2018, listening to interviews with Loomis for their own research.
Nothing to be gained from keeping evil alive.
David Brewer's art for issue 1 is also solid, but the way he draws all the faces is a little too pretty. It sort of has a manga-ish influence to it, but a lot of the characters look kind of plasticky, doll-like, but it works in favor of Michael's blank expressions.
The blackest eyes.
Issue 2, The Blackest Eyes, as is often the case with Halloween trilogies, is where things start to get off the rails with the storyline. Like with Halloween 2 or Kills, Issue 2 picks up directly after the events of the previous story, with Tommy Doyle hunting the Shape. This time with a gun, though, instead of a baseball bat. He's not gonna have any better luck, but he at least stands a better chance.
Swing on Huckleberry here. Say night-night.
Meanwhile, at the Myers place, we catch up with Richie Castle, a very minor character from the original film, who was one of Tommy's bullies and gets grabbed by Michael. Richie was played by Mickey Yablans, the son of one of the film's producers, Irwin Yablans, and Mickey Yablans actually co-wrote issue 2, revealing what became of his very minor character. And it kinda doesn't make sense. Richie is 31 in this story, and he looks like Danny DeVito now, but with hair, which, okay, he aged poorly. But the comic also mentions that he became a real estate tycoon that lost all of his cash, his wife, and his house during the market crash in the 80s. But Richie would have been a fucking teenager in the 80s. It feels like he's written to be 10 or 20 years older than he would be, but you know, whatever. This is the only Richie Castle lore we've ever gotten. Not even Halloween Kills bothered to turn him into a character, and they gave characters with 2 lines of dialogue in previous films entire character arcs in that movie.
The boogeyman! Who's the boogeyman? The boogeyman!
Richie is now a weed dealer, and while on the way to meet Lonnie Elam for a deal, Richie decides to burn down the Myers place as a little treat. But Richie ends up killed, of course. Not by Michael, though, but by former Sheriff Brackett, who assumed Richie was Michael Myers. But Brackett, as a former cop, does the honorable thing and takes Richie's body 5 miles out of town and buries it in a field. He's not going to jail for an accident. We all make mistakes.
Not him. Not him, Tommy!
Meanwhile, Lonnie Elam, who looks conspicuously like John Carpenter, swings by the Myers place to meet Richie for weed. But instead, Lonnie gets the death inside the Myers house we didn't get to actually see in Halloween Kills. Tommy witnesses Brackett's burial of Richie, though, and after a confrontation, Brackett reveals that there has always been a conspiracy surrounding Michael Myers in Haddonfield, an awareness from the beginning that Michael would become a killer someday, something Brackett discovered later.
Doc, it sounds to me like you're talking about the Antichrist.
This is Daniel Ferrans resurrecting the hokey Thorn cult from Curse of Michael Myers, but it's even goofier than ever before in this comic. It's revealed that Michael Myers is the descendant of a cursed bloodline of druids. Great, a Druish slasher villain.
Funny. He doesn't look Druish.
The Myers family has the curse of Samhain. For the male Myers, they bear the evil of Samhain and kill. For the women, they see visions and can have psychic abilities, which essentially explains Jamie's psychic link to Michael and Laurie's vivid dreams in Halloween 2 and H20. The 3 generations leading up to the Myers family spawning Michael managed to be evil-free somehow, but after a 3-day labor, Michael Myers emerged into the world stillborn, but was reborn on the Day of the Dead, November 1st, though Michael's birthday in most canons is October 19th. Michael in his early life is just a normal boy with a pumpkin-shaped head, but that eventually changes when Michael kills his sister Judith, and it's revealed that Brackett dated Judith in high school and her death made him want to become a cop. Which also doesn't make sense. Brackett is a 40-year-old sheriff in the original Halloween with a 17-year-old daughter. How does that work 15 years after Judith dies at the age of 17?
It's hard growing up with a cynical father.
Essentially, issue 2 of Chaos Comics Halloween doubles down on the origin story bullshit of Curse of Michael Myers, further elaborating on it to the point where there is absolutely no mystery left to Michael Myers, and reveals that he is explicitly a supernatural entity.
According to Celtic legend, one child was chosen to be inflicted with the curse of Thorn.
I don't personally need or want answers for what drives Michael to kill, especially when the answers are so goofy.
Who knows what makes him kill, what motivates him?
Speaking of goofy shit, Tommy and Brackett are ambushed by members of the Thorn cult, led by Tommy's old landlady, Mrs. Blankenship.
He hears the voice, you know, the night he murdered his sister.
And at a church, the cult intends to sacrifice Tommy and Brackett as a way to appease Samhain or some bullshit, which will theoretically also keep Michael at bay, but the priest presiding over the ceremony refuses to go along with it, freeing Tommy and Brackett only to get stabbed in the back by the shape. Tommy and Brackett fight Michael and try the setting Michael's head on fire thing once more. It doesn't work again, and Brackett is stabbed in the struggle. But Tommy does manage to electrocute Michael with a transformer, which somehow causes the church to explode, and as Brackett dies, the Church of Thorn pins everything on Tommy, who ends up imprisoned at Smith's Grove Sanitarium. But like with the late OJ, we all know that the real killer is out there. Well, Chaos Comics Halloween's first issue played things straight and just told an unseen story between the events of the first Halloween, issue 2 is just a total clusterfuck of off-the-wall crazy bullshit, giving very definitive explanations of Michael Myers that are just nutty. It turns Brackett into a total scumbag, and it distracts from the shape with more of the Cult of Thorn nonsense from Curse of Michael Myers. The issue's artwork by Jerry Beck is also a mixed bag. It captures the look of the original Halloween, but the art makes every character look like they have the same face with different haircuts, sharp brows, and cheekbones. They all look super pissed off or like they smelled a nasty fart. Everybody's clothes are really baggy and wrinkled, like they're wearing garbage bags, and the kids all have Hey Arnold-shaped heads. But Michael does look fine in this art style, at least, though.
The devil's eyes.
The third issue of Chaos Comics Halloween is an improvement over issue 2, taking back some of the supernatural aspects and making things ambiguous, but it still has quite a bit of crazy in it. After having a dream where Laurie died defending him from the boogeyman, Tommy awakens in Smith's Grove Sanitarium, where he's been imprisoned for 2 years, and for reasons unexplained, Tommy Doyle looks exactly like Dr. Loomis now, with a shaved head and goatee. I guess they let you shave at Smith's Grove Sanitarium, and Tommy Doyle was a big fan of Dr. Loomis's Homer Simpson look.
That can't stop Michael.
Nothing will stop Michael.
It's very on the nose in this comic that Daniel Ferrans wanted Tommy Doyle to become the new Dr. Loomis. Just make him look exactly like Dr. Loomis suddenly, so there won't even be a question about it.
You're the new Loomis.
An actually questionable thing about this issue is that Dr. Terrence Wynn is back as the chief administrator of Smith's Grove Sanitarium, even though he seemed to be killed in Curse of Michael Myers. But somehow the Man in Black has returned.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Wynn does survive in the producer's cut, which is Ferrans' preferred version of Curse of Michael Myers, but that wasn't officially released until like 15 years after this comic came out. And in the producer's cut ending, Michael becomes the new Man in Black, with Dr. Loomis getting the Thorn Curse. So I just don't know what the hell is going on with this comic's timeline.
It's your game now, Dr. Loomis.
Anyway, though, Dr. Wynn has Tommy Doyle marked for death, which will be made to look like a suicide. But Tommy didn't cut his hair like Dr. Loomis just to die like this. So Tommy escapes from Smith's Grove to show the world his newfound lack of hair. Meanwhile, we meet up with Lindsay Wallace, the other kid Laurie ended up babysitting in 1978. Lindsay is now a journalist who has returned to Haddonfield to try to uncover what became of Laurie Strode, who, after seemingly decapitating her brother Michael while she was in hiding under the assumed name Carrie Tate, disappeared along with Michael's severed head, essentially connecting Halloween H20 to the Thorn Trilogy. To make things more confusing timeline-wise, this comic takes place in 2001, and they say that Laurie disappeared a year ago, making Halloween H20 take place in 2000 instead of 1998, technically making it Halloween H22. The change in timeline is for the sake of the comic's twist to work, but I'll get into that in a bit. Tommy catches up with Lindsay at the Wallace house, and they hear noises upstairs, stumbling upon a remake of a scene from the original Halloween. But this time Annie is joined by Bob and Linda, which means the shape isn't too far away. So after escaping Michael, Lindsay flees to the safety of the Myers house to brush her hair like Judith Myers before her, but fully clothed. And after a scuffle where the shape is stabbed in the eye yet again, it's actually revealed that Michael Myers is, gasp, Laurie Strode, who stabs Tommy in the neck as they fly out Judith's window, and Laurie ends up incarcerated at Smith's Grove Sanitarium.
The other half is taken over.
This ending is basically a Psycho homage, which is literally explained by a guy named Dr. Block, named after the writer of Psycho. After Laurie killed Michael, she couldn't exist without him, so Laurie became Michael in his absence, and Laurie kept Michael's head as a trophy, like how Norman Bates kept his mother's body preserved while he adopted her persona.
Norman Bates no longer exists. He only half existed to begin with.
The first 2 issues of Chaos Comics Halloween take place a year before the events of Halloween H20. So the Michael Myers we see in those issues is the real thing though, not Laurie. So this comic series makes Michael's death in H20 definitive, and the supernatural elements surrounding Michael are dispelled. The Myers family curse is deemed to actually be centuries of mental illness, alcoholism, and possibly incest. Daniel Ferrans, with his idea for Halloween 8, sought to connect H20 with the Thorn Trilogy, but to also keep Michael's death in that film permanent, something he was aware would be nullified by Mustafa Akkad with the actual Halloween 8.
Oh my god, she killed the wrong person.
Daniel Ferrans is a real stickler for continuity. You kill Michael, he has to stay dead, and it's how the Thorn cult came to be. They showed a thorn tattoo and a man in black with no explanation in the 5th film. So Ferrans made it his mission with the 6th film to fully explain all of that to the detriment of Michael Myers. But the lore and continuity matters so much more than the mystery and horror, so nerds like me can feel like we haven't been wasting our time memorizing obscure plot points from Halloween sequels. We feel like our useless knowledge has been rewarded. Daniel Ferrans was also aware that Jamie Lee Curtis was contractually obligated to film a cameo for an 8th Halloween film, so he wanted this cameo to be an insane twist that people would talk about for years like a Shyamalan movie, and it also pays off the idea of somebody else taking over the mantle of Michael Myers, which was teased before in Halloween 4 with Jamie Lloyd, and later in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 with his version of Laurie Strode coincidentally. Hold your fire! But this idea was never fully executed in a film until Halloween Ends. Ultimately, I do greatly prefer this take on a Halloween 8 over what we got with Halloween Resurrection, where the Laurie Strode cameo is pointless to the rest of the film, and the actual movie deals with a throwaway internet reality show gimmick.
Let the dangertainment begin now!
The comic version of Halloween 8 is easily better, and I wish this was the movie we got, but you know, being better than Halloween Resurrection isn't saying much. The overarching story of Chaos Comics Halloween is a mess of exposition and resurrections of dumb ideas from the Thorn Trilogy, overcomplicating the mythos of Michael Myers, and, like Daniel Ferrans predicted, the twist of Laurie becoming the new killer would be divisive amongst fans if it was done in a movie. And while I like the idea of somebody else trying to become Michael Myers, I enjoyed that aspect of Halloween 4's ending, and Halloween Ends with the Corey Cunningham plotline, I don't like the idea of Laurie Strode going insane and becoming a killer. What Laurie Strode represents is survival, overcoming adversity, and becoming stronger because of it. By having her ultimately succumb to her inner darkness, it destroys what Laurie's character represents. It's why I don't agree with Rob Zombie's approach to the character in his second Halloween movie, but with a character like Corey Cunningham, his purpose as a character is to explore how the perceptions of others can infect you and change who you are.
Like a sickness or an infection.
Issue 3 of Chaos Comics Halloween is an improvement over Issue 2. It's much less exposition heavy and has a lot more action, with a twist that does manage to tie H20 to the Thorn Trilogy, but it also makes for a strong argument for why H20 needed to disregard the Thorn Trilogy to begin with. It's just too goofy and overcomplicates the beautifully simple premise of Halloween: an evil man in a mask killing people on October 31st. I will say that the artwork for Issue 3 by Justiniano is the best artwork for the Chaos Comics Halloween series. It has a very bold, distinctive, somewhat cartoony style to it that looks like it could be taken straight out of a Halloween animated film. It's cool-looking art, but there is some very crazy and not fun trivia surrounding the artist behind it, Justiniano. In 2011, in preparation for his father's funeral, Justiniano gave the funeral home a thumb drive that was supposed to have pictures of his father on it for a presentation. But instead, the thumb drive contained, let's just say the kinds of pictures Victor Salva or Jared Fogle would have on their hard drives. And Justiniano pleaded guilty to the charges and went to prison. Isn't that just fucking insane? Also insane is that the final issue of Chaos Comics Halloween was published a week after 9/11, so the comic ends with a tribute to the fallen, which is nice, but it's also very jarring to read at the end of a comic book series about a guy who goes around killing people.
Fear moves through all of us.
Chaos Comics Halloween overall is a mixed bag, but the first issue is a very solid, self-contained story. It almost seems like these comics were originally intended to be an anthology series exploring different points in the Halloween franchise's history. But then Daniel Ferran saw that the 8th Halloween movie would be released the following year, and Chaos Comics was about to go out of business and would lose the Halloween license, so Ferrans wanted to get his idea of what his version of Halloween 8 would be out in the world before Resurrection came out, and people would point to these comics and say, this is what Halloween 8 should have been. When even dog shit would look good in comparison to Halloween Resurrection. And yeah, Resurrection quickly made these comics non-canon, creating yet another branching timeline in the process when these comics were attempting to merge all the timelines back together. The only resemblance between the Chaos comics and Halloween Resurrection is that Laurie Strode becomes institutionalized after the events of H20. Still, the Chaos comic series is a fun read to see what could have been for Halloween 8. There have been many rejected Halloween sequel pitches and screenplays, but in this case, you get a rejected pitch as an actual official release with actual visuals to go along with it for a change, and the visuals of each issue are overall pretty good. I give Chaos Comics Halloween a Tommy Doyle with Dr. Loomis's haircut out of Dr. Loomis. If you'd like more Halloween comic reviews like this one in the future, let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more Camp October. Before I go, I'm gonna catch up with my head camp counselor, Goulash, to see how things are going at Camp October. Hey Goulash, how are the campers doing?
Well, one of the campers was just mauled by a bear.
What the how did that happen?
I don't know, a bear just walked into camp and fucking attacked her.
Well, what did you do about it?
What do you expect me to do about it? I hid in one of the cabins till the bear left.
Okay, well, did you make sure to dispose of the body?
Yeah.
And did you mail her parents a fake letter from her saying that you ran away from the camp?
I was about to.
Good. Get it done right away. I'm gonna need to remember to edit this part out of the video. This video is made possible through the pledges of my Patreon supporters, and I'd like to give a very special thanks to the kind folks pledged to my shoutouts tier. All of the support on Patreon means a lot to me, and it helps my dark influence continue to grow. If you like this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. Be sure to also keep in touch by following me on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Dr. Wolfula. While I still have your attention, consider pledging to my Patreon to support the channel and get bonus content like previews, VIP Discord server access, private movie night streams, and credits in videos. Consider pledging at patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula. Also, check out official Dr. Wolfula t-shirts and other merch on tpublic.com/user/Dr. Wolfula. Thanks for watching. See you all next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.